The Scorch Trials, Chapter 25, on this PDF, page 86. The rain fell in torrents, like God had sucked up the ocean and spit it out all over their heads in a fury. Thomas sat in the exact same place for at least 2 hours as he watched it. He huddled against the wall, exhausted and sore, willing his hearing to come back. It seemed to be working. What had been a complete throb of silence had decreased its pressure, and the ringing had gone away. When he coughed, he thought it was more than just a vibration he felt. He heard a trace of it, and in the distance, as if far from the other side of a dream, came the steady drumming sound of the rain. Maybe he wouldn't be deaf after all. The dull gray light coming from the windows did little to fight off the cold darkness inside the building. The other gladers sat hunched up or lying on their sides around the room. Minot was curled up in a ball at Thomas's feet, barely moving. It looked as if every shift sent waves of burning pain through his nerves. Newt was there also, close, as was Frypan. But no one tried to talk or get things organized. No one counted off the gladers or tried to figure out who was missing. They all sat or lay as lifeless as Thomas, probably pondering the same thing he was. What kind of messed up world could create a storm like that? The soft thrum of the rain grew louder until Thomas had no more doubt he could really hear it. It was a soothing sound, despite everything, and he finally fell asleep. By the time he woke up, his body so stiff it felt like glue had dried in his veins and muscles. All the machinery in his ears and head was back to fully functional. He heard the heavy breaths of sleeping gladers, heard the whimpering moans from Minot, heard the now pounding deluge of water slamming into the pavement outside. But it was dark, completely. At some point, night had fallen. Pushing away his discomfort, letting the exhaustion take over, he shifted until he lay flat, his head propped on someone's leg. Then he was asleep again. Two things woke him up for good: the glow of sunrise and a sudden rush of silence. The storm was over, and he'd slept through the night. But even before he felt the stiffness and soreness he expected, he felt something much more overpowering: hunger. The light came through the broken windows and dappled the floor around him. He looked up to see a ruin of a building, massive holes ripped in each floor all the way to the roof, dozens of stories toward the sky. It seemed that only the steel infrastructure was keeping the whole thing from coming down. He couldn't imagine what had caused it all to happen, but jags of bright blue seemed to hover above, a sight that seemed impossible last time he'd been outside. Whatever horror that storm had been, whatever quirks in the climate of the earth could cause such a thing, it really did seem to be gone for now. Sharp pains stabbed at his stomach, which groaned, aching for food. He glanced around to see most of the other gladers still asleep, but Newt lay with his back against the wall, staring sadly at a blank spot in the middle of the room. "You okay there?" Thomas asked. Even his jaw felt stiff. Newt slowly turned to him. His eyes were distant until he seemed to snap out of his thoughts and focus on Thomas. "Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm okay. We're alive. Guess that's all that bloody matters anymore." The bitterness in his voice couldn't have been stronger. "Sometimes I wonder," Thomas murmured. "Wonder what? If being alive matters, if being dead might be a lot easier." "Please, I don't believe for 1 second you really think that." Thomas's gaze lowered while he delivered the depressing sentiment, and he looked up sharply at Newt's retort. Then he smiled, and it felt good. "You're right. Just trying to sound as miserable as you." He could almost convince himself that was true, that he didn't feel as if dying would be the easy way out. Newt gestured wearily towards Minot. "What bloody happened to him?" "Lightning strike somehow caught his clothes on fire. How it did that without frying his brain, I have no idea, but we were able to beat it out before it did too much damage, I think." before it did too much damage? I'd hate to see what you think real damage looks like. Thomas closed his eyes for a second and rested his head against the wall. Hey, like you said, he's alive, right? And he still has clothes on, which means it couldn't have burned his skin in too many places. He'll be fine. Yeah, good that, Newt replied with a sarcastic chuckle. Remind me not to hire you as my buggin' doctor anytime soon. Oh, this came from Minot, a long, drawn-out groan. His eyes fluttered open, then squinted as he caught Thomas's gaze. Oh, man, I'm shucked. I'm shucked for good. How bad is it? Newt asked him. Instead of answering, Minot very slowly pushed himself up into a sitting position, grunting and wincing with every small move. But he finally did it, legs crossed beneath him. His clothes were blackened and ragged. In some places where the skin was exposed, raw, red blisters peeked out like menacing alien eyeballs. But even though Thomas wasn't a doctor and had no clue about such things, his instincts told him the burns were manageable and would heal pretty quickly. Most of Minot's face had been spared, and he still had all of his hair, filthy as it was. Can't be too bad if you can do that, Thomas said with a sly smile. Shuck it, Minot responded. I'm tougher than nails. I could still kick your pony-lovin' butt with twice this pain. Thomas shrugged. I do love ponies. Wish I could eat one right now. His stomach grumbled and gurgled. Was that a joke? Minot said. Did Thomas the boring slinthead actually make a joke? I think he did, was Newt's response. I'm a funny guy, Thomas said with a shrug. Yeah, you are. But Minot obviously had already lost interest in the small talk. He twisted his head around to take in the rest of the gladers, most of them asleep or lying still with blank looks on their faces. How many? Thomas counted them up, 11. After all they'd been through, only 11 were left, and that included the new kid, Eris. 40 to 50 had lived in the glade when Thomas first arrived, just a few weeks before. Now there were 11. 11. He couldn't bring himself to say anything out loud after this realization, and the lighter moment only seconds earlier suddenly seemed like pure blasphemy, like an abomination. How could I be a part of Wicked, he thought. How could I have been any part of this? He knew he should tell them about his memory dreams, but he just couldn't. There's only 11 of us, Newt finally said. There, it was out. So, what, 6 died in the storm? 7? Minot sounded completely detached, as if he were counting how many apples they'd lost when the packs had blown away. 7, Newt snapped, showing his disapproval of the cavalier attitude. Then, in a softer tone, 7, unless people ran into different buildings. Dude, Minot said, how are we going to fight our way through this city with only 11 people? There could be hundreds of cranks in this place for all we know, thousands, and we don't have a clue what to expect from them. Newt let out a big breath. And that's all you can buggin' think about? What about the people who died, Minot? Jack's missing. So is Winston. He never had a chance. And he looked around. I don't see Stan or Tim either. What about them? Whoa, 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 Minot held up his hands, palms facing Newt. Slim it, nice and calm, brother. I didn't ask to be the shuck leader. You want to cry all day about what's happened? Fine, but that's not what a leader does. A leader figures out where to go and what to do after that's done. Well, guess that's why you got the job then, Newt said, but then a look of apology washed over his face. Whatever. Seriously, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry too. Minot rolled his eyes, though, and Thomas hoped against hope that Newt didn't notice because his gaze had fallen to the floor again. Luckily, Eris scooted over to join them. Thomas wanted the conversation to go in a different direction. Ever seen anything like that lightning storm? The new kid asked. Thomas shook his head because Eris was looking at him. Didn't seem natural. Even in my clunky memories, I'm pretty sure stuff like that doesn't happen normally. But remember what the Rat Man said, and that lady told you on the bus, Minot said. Sun flares and the whole world burning like hell itself. That'd screw up any climate plenty enough to make crazy storms like that pop up. I have a feeling we're lucky it wasn't worse. Not sure lucky is the first word I think of, Eris said. Yeah, well. Newt pointed at the broken glass on the floor where the glow of sunrise had brightened into the same white brilliance they'd grown accustomed to their first couple of days out in the scorch. Least it's over. We better start thinking about what we're going to do next. See, Minot said. You're just as heartless as me, and you're right. Thomas remembered the image of the cranks at the windows and back at the dorm. Like living nightmares missing only a death certificate to make them official zombies. Yeah, we better figure things out before we have a bunch of those crazies show up. But I'm telling you, we gotta eat first. We gotta find food. The last word almost hurt. He wanted some so badly. Food? Thomas pulled in a gasp of surprise. The voice had come from above. He looked up just as the others did. A face looked down at them from the shredded remains of the third floor. That of a young Hispanic man. His eyes were slightly wild, and Thomas felt a belt of tension cinch inside of him. Who are you? Minot shouted. Then, to Thomas's utter disbelief, the man jumped through the jagged hole in the ceilings, falling toward them. At the last second, he crumpled into a human ball and rolled 3 times, then sprang up and landed on his feet. My name is George, he said, his arms outstretched as if he expected applause for his acrobatics. And I'm the crank who rules this place.